got some exciting news. If you're seeing this on live, we have a special edition today because this is going to be a doozy because the topic for today is the silent scars, how childhood emotional neglect rewires adult relationships. A lot of the times, including myself, we didn't know that our beliefs from, if you've seen last week's episode and stuff, that how trauma just controls a lot of different things in our lives. And if you want to go back and watch that, please go ahead and watch that. We're waiting for Doc to come on from FCS LLC. He's a therapist. My name is Gordon Watt. I'm founder of Boundaries and Brotherhood. Have you ever wondered why you struggle with some sort of intimacy relationship, blowing up relationships, and perpetually just being misunderstood with a lot of different things going on? It could be from your parents' trauma, everything that's been going on. Doc, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, you're here, but I don't see you. Your voice is there, but not your picture. That's
weird. I'm wondering what's going on. Technology is not being my friend today, everybody. I apologize.
So we're both TikTok, live, YouTube, streaming, everything else going on. And today we're having some big news, guys. We got our first official sponsorship from TDP Specialties. We just came out with our new beef jerky brand. It's on fire. But we'll be giving out some samples. Watch for the comments to get some free things. We're going to be showing you a lot of stuff. Between me and Doc, we've been working on this for a long time. If you want to take the assessment right here, go to the new page right here, assessment.boundariesandbrotherhood.com. Fill out the assessment, get on the wait list. We're going to be working on workshops to get you guys straight. Doc, introduce yourself. What are we going to be doing? And what's going to be this episode about? Well, I guess technically set up.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, guys, for all the wires in the front and the hands and getting set up and everything like that.
It happens.
But today, guys, we're going to be talking about how childhood neglect, how that can affect us and how it does affect us in adulthood. And I know us a lot of times as guys, when we're in relationships, right, what we'll say is, we just need to move forward, just forget about it. It happened. Let's move on like nothing ever happened, right? A lot of times we say that. But the fact of the matter is, we don't just forget things. We don't just move on. None of us do. No matter how manly you think you are or, how much you think maybe you're an outlier, none of us actually just forget things and move on. If that was the case, if time healed all wounds like we claim it does, then no trauma wouldn't exist. PTSD wouldn't exist.
True.
Now, I want you to tell someone that's been in the military who's seen horrible tragedies and seen their friends get killed next to them and seeing children die and seeing bodies. I want you to tell them, oh, yeah, just give it time. They'll pass on. Just forget about it. Move forward. It doesn't work that way.
No.
And so today we're going to be talking about how certain treatment when we're younger, how that affects us later on, and how we can actually break free from that as well. Because just because something happened to us when we were younger doesn't mean we have to stay that way. So
no, absolutely.
That's what we're talking about today.
Because a lot of times, like even for myself, the trauma that your parents did affect how I see relationships, how I see marriage, how I see certain things. If I haven't been around in a good marriage, how would I know if I didn't break the cycle myself, right?
Exactly.
Because, a lot of the times you might have emotional baggage, trauma, signs of emotional neglect and attention, right? Okay. You think about it, when I went to prison, I didn't get a visit for 10 plus 12 years. That's an attention deficit on my end, not feeling abandoned and loved. Now, is it my situation could have been different? Maybe, but does it happen to other people at an early age? This is why I give my kids as much attention as they can. And even though they're rambunctious, even they're crazy, even though they're supposed to be, they have the confidence to be themselves instead of being always protected, right?
Yeah.
Because, in fact, just last night, they got into their stepsister's tampon stash and it was all over the floor. They're playing Legos with the tampons. Dad, look at these cottons, Dad. I'm like, what the? But did I yell at them? No, I enjoy it. I have the fun because why? I don't want to tell them no. I'll usually tell them, I'll think about it and see what we can do. How many times you've been told no as a child, right? Boy. So now those go into things when I say like, let me think about it. Let's revisit this. But how do you see children's beliefs and systems and everything else affect adults in the space?
So when you think about it, I think the first thing I want to do in part of answering this question is, what is neglect, right? A lot of times we think neglect is just, oh, you don't have food, you don't have water, you don't have housing, you don't have clothes. That's neglect. And yeah, that is definitely neglect. Don't get me wrong. But what happens more often, because a lot of times we use that as the standard, right? Well, especially as parents. Well, I work, I provide food for you and clothes and electricity and all those things. So how could you say you've been neglected? I was a great parent because I did all those things, those basic things. And the reason why I say it's basic things but that's the bare minimum. You weren't going to be homeless just because you weren't married. You weren't going to be homeless just because you didn't have kids. You weren't not going to work. You weren't not going to get clothes. Like, you were going to do that stuff anyways. So to ask for all this additional credit for something you would already do anyways is kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy to ask for credit for what you were going to do anyways. We don't get credit for breathing. Well, I breathed today, that should be enough for you guys. We don't do that. So as parents, as men, let's stop using the things that we would already do as like evidence of I'm doing so much. So with that being said, now moving on to how we mostly neglect our kids, because for the most part, most of us we're working. Most of us are paying bills. Most of us, are getting their clothes and the food. Like, we're doing that stuff, right? Most kids have that basic stuff, right? And so then you wonder, like, well, then how did so many kids come out neglected? So many adults struggle with different types of attachment styles? There's a neglect that we don't talk about often enough, and that's that emotional neglect, where you're dismissing and invalidating your kids. You're telling them to stop crying. You're telling them they need to, young boys, you need to man up. You're telling them that their feelings don't matter. You're telling them that they shouldn't be crying, or you're telling them that it's not a big deal, or you do that, or they have these ideas, instead of like going like the example you gave, when our kids make a mistake or they have ideas and things like that, we shut them down, or we tear them down and things like that. And we think what we're doing is, well, I'm preparing you for the real world. But the fact of the matter is, they go into the real world, now they're damaged. Now they're not emotionally available for other people. That's exactly right. I mean, we think about how kids are supposed to, like how kids are. Our job as parents are to teach them. Every mistake they make is a teaching opportunity for us, not to beat them down or neglect them or to ignore them or things of that nature. That's what happens. So when we do this, we neglect them. We don't spend time with them. We don't listen to them. We do all these things. And then when they start separating from us, then we start making up more excuses. Oh, well, they're just a teenager. They're just going through a teenage stage. Or kids, they leave their parents and go hang out with their friends and things like that. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, because when people are securely attached, yes, they go, but they come back to home base. But instead of looking at, like, no, this is a problem. My child won't talk to me. I'm getting one-word answers.
Yeah.
Where did I go wrong? So it's because, well, you've neglected them. Emotionally, you've neglected them. They don't feel connected to you. They don't feel safe with you. And so what happens is that's how that translates to when we're adults. That's when the attachment styles come in, right? When you become insecure, anxious, where maybe you had the inconsistent connections when you were younger. And so now if you feel like you're losing something, and this happens to a lot of guys, unfortunately, society labels them as simps and things like that. A lot of these guys,
we did one.
Well, a lot of these guys, Gordon, they came from where there was their attachment when they were younger.
Correct.
They didn't know if they were going to get love. They didn't know if they were going to get hit or they had no idea. So there's all this anxiety. So now when they go on, they're trying to earn love because they didn't have secure attachment back then. And then you have the other side where you have the insecure avoidant type, where we want to be stoic, or we want to shut down, or we want to act like we don't care, or if we get close and we get hurt, we want to shut down and walk away and run away. There's that aspect as well. And that comes into our lives and our relationships. We wonder why we struggle so much. And sometimes you're avoided. And now you're kind of like all over the place. It's like it's chaotic. And so all these things are born out of that neglect that comes when we're younger. And simply because our parents are not making an emotionally safe space for us to just live and grow and learn and feel safe and connected and loved. And so, Gordon, like what you're doing with your boys, that's going to avoid all that. You're going to have young men, when they grow up, your boys are going to be securely attached. They're not going to have that emotional abuse or emotional trauma. They're not going to have that neglect when they get older. So they're going to know who they are. They're going to be able to speak their mind. They're going to be sovereign men out the gate. They're going to be the 11th man out the gate because they're not being neglected as children emotionally.
A lot of it has to do with how you treat them and not repeating the same cycles I've been through, right? Because if you go through same cycles, when I look at my trauma, my situation, whatever else has happened that you got going on, that I had going on, my first kid, my first daughter was a wreck. Like I can see the damage I've done, right? From the neglect, the attention, and everything else, and just being selfish on my part, in the streets, doing all that good stuff. My second daughter, who I have no contact with because the parents just hated me, which it's understandable because the monster I was. But when it came down to taking a chance with Andrea and have my wife and my family now, it always was in the back of my head. What if I screw this whole thing up and I repeat this whole trauma? It's almost a PTSD in my part, right? Because it's not like I came from a solid home, right? But I always craved family. I always wanted a second chance. And I prayed to God when I was in prison for all those years, give me one more chance to make it up. One more chance. And that's why I've held on. And this is why people ask me, like, how can you just let them go? Something? Because do I yell? Absolutely. Do I lose my cool sometimes? Absolutely. But at the same time, I let them be them. So they're not afraid. They're not like afraid to go throw sand at the wall. In fact, what he did the other day, they did something the other day was even more crazy. Dad, I was making snow. Lotion, baking powder, and stuff in the bathroom. I opened it up, poof. He was like, but Dad, I was making snow for us.
I love it.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I can't knock him for that. But at the same time, I don't want him being afraid of me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I diminish his confidence. He don't get to be who he wants. And I recognize my generational trauma. And that's big.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. Does generational trauma affect how you treat your other half in the future, in what you're seeing in?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because what ends up happening is not only do you get that, see, a lot of times that neglect, where it comes from, that emotional, it comes from generational trauma. Whether you want to call it generational curses or generational patterns, whatever you want to call it, it's passed down from our parents who also probably were neglected when they were younger. Now, I've worked with a lot of clients when we start talking about their parents and start talking about how their parents came up, it makes sense as to why they weren't there for you. It makes sense to why they're emotionally absent. It makes sense as to why they bounced. All that stuff makes sense, right? Because the same thing you're experiencing right now is the same thing they experience, because we can only give what we have. If your parent has never been securely attached, if they never felt that, if they never felt like anybody cared or anybody loved them because that's what they experienced when they were younger, well, then, yeah, they're going to pass that down on to you. And so the sad part is, as children, we don't really have too much of a say in what we take on, the beliefs we take on, because our brains are open. We're just trying to take in as much information as we possibly can to understand how to operate in this world. So unfortunately, what happens is a lot of the beliefs that we have growing up, or even as adults, are not our own. Maybe you didn't want to be, I'll use an extreme example, you didn't want to engage in domestic violence when you were younger. But that's all you saw and that's all you knew. No matter how much you said, oh, I hated that man for what he did to my mother, a lot of times those guys end up doing the same thing in later relationships. Maybe your father was timid and that's what you picked up. Or maybe your father was, used to get enraged and that's what you pick up. So unfortunately, when we're younger, we pick up those negative beliefs, those negative behaviors from our parents, then from others and around us. And so that's why by the time we're age 7, most of that stuff and how we're going to be locked in. And then by the age of 10, almost all of it is. So 95% of how you're going to be is locked in by age 10. A majority of that time, you weren't even aware that you were picking up different beliefs. Imagine that. So how that translates into our relationships later on, those generational patterns, curses, behaviors, whatever, how that translates later on, you're just going to do the same thing your father did. You can do the same thing he did. You can respond the same way, talk the same way, act the same way. Shoot, I was a living example of that. When I first got married and I was dealing with my daughter, when we first got together, I was responding to her the same way my father would respond to me. That's what you were supposed to do. I used the excuse that, well, I turned out fine. And let me also say this. Anyone who says, well, I turned out fine, probably didn't turn out fine. Let's be honest.
They're covering it up.
Right? Anybody who says, I turned out fine, everything was fine.
That's a red flag.
Didn't turn out fine. Guarantee it didn't turn out fine. Because even the people who have actually turned out fine, they're able to go back and look and say, yeah, things weren't the best. There were some things that were good, some things that were bad, some things I had to unlearn, some things I had to learn. But for the most part, though, it was pretty good. But to think that, yeah, I just came out fine, which is exactly what I thought, and I wasn't fine. I realized a lot of things my dad did and did not do was not okay. So I had to, this isn't a dig at my father, just in case any of my family sees it or anything like that, or family friends or whatnot. It's not a dig at my father. I love my father, but my dad grew up a certain way. He didn't receive certain things. He carried that forward, and he made changes. Now I'll say this. Now he made changes from what his father did. He's made changes from that. And so then what happened? So now it's my turn as the next generation to look at what he did and improve upon it. That's how it's supposed to be. So long story short, you ask the question, does it bleed into our relationships? 100%, because a majority of it, unless you changed it, is still there. That's just how you learn. That's how you were programmed. And so now it's time for us to be able to take a look at ourselves and so it's like, okay, what needs to change? How do I like to be there present in my wife's life, in my children's life? How can I be a better man? How can I be a sovereign man? Right? We need to stop and ask ourselves that question and then start actually doing the work, the real work to become exactly as God designed us to be.
Right. Let me switch this camera right there. When you figure out what, basically, when you dive deep and you like Doc says, we really have to put in the work a lot of what we did, because you cannot surface level all of this stuff. Between my stepdad, my real dad, one was timid, one had the money, one was abusive, one was tall. It's, where do I belong in all this crap, right? So I get confused, right? Mm-hmm. So when you get confused as a young child, you try to do stupid things to get the attention you think you deserve, and you just fall back in place, right? When you get into criminality, you get into gangs, you get into this trauma. When I'm watching this show right now, Unlocked on Netflix, right? Because I'm almost like watching prison shows where it's like you got some of the older cats that want them to change, the young guys to change, but then you have the younger guys and they don't even know they're traumatized, but they're living in this pod and they're going through all this stuff. And when I look at the stories that they have, it's like I can see myself in each and every single one of them and the characters that's in there, because I've did so much time with these type of people.
Yeah.
And I always wondered, was it just me, or is it just because a lot of times people just don't understand where it came from? A lot of times they don't know where it came from. Like myself, I don't know where it came from. I just acted, say I wanted attention. Okay, I got to play sports just to feel accepted.
And Gordon, I'll say this, man. You know, a lot of times we don't take the time to find out what's going on with other people. We don't, right? So you mentioned like people, they just don't know, right? They just don't know. And the fact of the matter is that everything that everybody does makes sense. If you take time to stop and ask them a question, everything that they say, it makes sense, right? But how would we ever know unless we're stopping to ask them questions and find out, bro, why did you join a gang? Why did you leave your family? Or why did you blow up on your wife and things like that? And you start asking them questions and it gets down to, I felt alone. I felt like nobody cared. I felt like this is the only way for me to get respect, the only way for me to be seen, only way for me to be accepted. Like you start asking these questions, like, yeah, that makes sense. If you live a life where you're completely invalidated and dismissed over and over again, you live a life where you keep trying to do right and people keep dogging you out and you keep getting dragged to the mud when you do that. But then when you do the wrong thing, you get the attention. You do the wrong thing, you make the money. You do the wrong thing, you get the girl. You do the wrong thing, you get all these things. I mean, it's hard to look at someone like, oh, you're just a miscreant and an evil person. It's like, yeah, but I tried to do it that way and it didn't work out. And of course, I'm not making excuses for bad behavior. I'm just saying, when you stop and ask people, hey, what's going on? How did you get here? And you listen to their story. You listen to not just their story, but the underlying message. Like, I felt alone. I felt like nobody cared. I felt all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, it makes sense as to why you would do what you would do. Again, it doesn't excuse the behavior, but it makes sense. But if we as men could recognize how we were neglected and fix that, and then for our children and other people, if we can start, hey, because I needed someone to listen to me. Now let me listen to them. Let me hear where they're coming from. And especially when it talks about our kids. So Gordon, like your son said, I'm trying to make snow. a lot of parents would yell and scream, and, oh my gosh, why are you wasting this? And how dare you? And blah, 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 all these things like that, as opposed to, man, that's really creative, man. Hey, but if you really want to make snow, let's try to do it another way, so because it's supposed to be cold and everything like that. So to teach and mold our kids like we need it, not destroy their creativity, not turn them into drones, but to truly cultivate them. And that's the place we got to get to, but we can't get to that place unless we do the work on ourselves first.
No, absolutely. I'm answering Mr. Paul Rosenberg right here. Right.
Yeah,
it's true concern.
PJ, man, for years, man. PJ, it's good to see you.
I'm putting it's on YouTube. You can get your questions answered right there, my brother. I mean, I hope we can just share, because that's what we have this channel here for, because a lot of times men don't know where we come. Like for me being that alpha type, the stoic type, because that's what you've been trained to do, and you just latch on to whatever else that you could be going on. Yeah. When you find out, when you look at your kids and you don't want them coming out like you got to change and do something different.
Yeah,
right.
Correct.
Because that's where that's where I get what you say, everything hits the road. Because when you think about it, when I really think deep about it, where did I go wrong? And it's like I said, we talked about my dad crying over there, the being killed, the boy getting killed on the freeway and stuff like that. And you kind of wonder, where does that all stem from? But at the same time, what are you doing about it? Like Doc said, how do you change your behavior? This is why we have Boundaries and Brotherhood workshop, seminars. In fact, Doc has to go present someplace today, and he's also promoting this. It's like the great thing about streaming this type of show, right? Where it's like, we can have an interactive questionnaire, live talk about it as grown adult men without even putting politics aside. Because why? We want you guys to communicate, have confidence, kill self-doubt, find purpose in your life. Once you find purpose and you dig deep and you put that work in, which we want to do in the workshops at every end of the month, sky's the limit of what you can do. Better intimacy, better relationships, better communication with your wife, your partner, whoever it is. Doc, let me ask you this other question, right?
Yeah.
As if you're stuck in an adult relationship that's just cycling, what would you suggest to the couple? Because you do couples therapy too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, what would you suggest, or handling that type of situation?
True concern is rare in 2026, man. And it's a shame. It shouldn't be that way, but hence the world we live in, but also why we have Boundaries and Brotherhood. So we could actually have a place where real concern can be there, and we can open up and share and be vulnerable and get the help we need. But Gordon, to answer your question, man, like you were saying, how do you break, if you find yourself in a cycle, it's going to sound real simple, but you just break the cycle. The cycle continues because of the same behaviors over and over again. I'll give you guys an illustration, guys. If you have a gears and the gears just keep going, right? They keep going in circles. What's going to happen? That's a cycle. If one gear stops and the other one keeps trying to go, what's going to happen to the mechanism? It's going to break. It's that simple. Someone has to stop the behaviors that are perpetuating the cycle. If you're in a relationship and you know how the cycle goes, your girlfriend or your wife comes to you and says, or your kids come to you and say, whatever, they say X. And when they say X, what ends up happening is you become defensive, and then you fire back and say Y, and then they escalate, and then now they're saying Z, and then now you're blowing up. And then now you guys go around for hours, and then, everyone's mad and upset and flustered and all this, and we bang tables and punch walls, and then everything settles down, and then you give it a few days or weeks or whatever, and then you finally get back together and everything's good, and we pretend nothing happened until the next thing comes up, and then rinse and repeat. So how do you break that? You change your behavior. This is one thing I tell my couples all the time. When I used to go on my prayer walks after me and my wife got into a fight, I would always pray about the situation, and God would always come to me and tell me to change something. Keith, you need to do this. Keith, you need to do that. You need to talk this way. You need to think this way. You need to believe this way. And eventually one time I'm like, man, God, I'm sick and tired of you coming to me. Why don't you go say something to her? Go say something to her. Get her to change. And he would say to me, don't worry about her. Worry about you. Me and you are here right now. So you worry about you. I'm telling you to do this. So do this. And so what ended up happening was I started changing. I started changing my behaviors, changing how I would talk, changing how I would emotionally regulate, changing how I would interact, changing how I would ask questions. I was changing. And so eventually what happened was it wasn't as smooth anymore. One of these things started to slow down. I started to slow down. And eventually it wasn't going the same way anymore, because I would say something, she might escalate, and then she might come and then say something. But instead of me firing back, I'm keeping my composure, trying to understand where she's coming from. I'm emotionally regulated. I started recognizing when I start getting heated, it's time for me to exit the conversation. I broke the cycle by breaking the cycle, by changing my own behaviors. And that's why I keep trying to tell my couples, I keep trying to tell men, don't focus on changing to please somebody else. Don't focus on trying to fix the relationship. Focus on changing because it's the right thing to do. The fact of the matter is, I was doing the wrong things. So that's why God was dealing with me. My responsibility wasn't to change my wife. The conversation was, how can you become a better man? And by me becoming a better man, learning how to communicate, learning how to emotionally regulate, learning how to listen properly, learning how to walk away, learning how to do all these things, by me learning how to apologize, learning how to not invalidate and dismiss, learning how to validate and empathize with where she's coming from, by God teaching me all these things, and me learning all these things, guess what? The cycle broke. And eventually, because this is what happens, the way the brain operates based off of patterns.
Absolutely. You got to recognize patterns.
Right? So if she has a pattern in her mind, like this is how it goes. Oh, he's trying not to understand me, so now I'm escalating, but he's not doing it anymore. Eventually what happens is the pattern doesn't work anymore because I'm not doing the same things I was doing before. So now it forces the other person's brain, it forces them to change. It forces them to change. And so when it forces them to change, that changes the relationship, right? Because what they're doing is not working anymore. It's just not working, right? And because there's some men that be like, Keith, I did all that. I'm a sovereign man. I'm the 11th man. I'm on point. God told me all this stuff too. And I changed too. And my wife is still crazy, or my girlfriend's still crazy, or whatever the case may be. Maybe you need to break up. Maybe you need to separate. Maybe you need to have that boundary where you say, you know what, you keep acting like this, and I'm going to find my own place. I know, again, if biblically speaking, if you're a Christian, we don't believe in divorce unless for like infidelity or things like that. But anybody else, well, I'm not trying to tell anyone to leave. I'm just saying, set that boundary. You can separate. And I'll say this, you can't separate, scripturally speaking, you can't separate. That's you can't separate, but essentially have that boundary, because even that is breaking the cycle. Because if you're normally just, well, I'm just going to stay anyways and let her talk to me any kind of way or treat me any kind of way, you're also still feeding the cycle, right? So, but if you find a simple way, it's like, oh shoot, it gives the other person an opportunity to look at their behaviors and be like, dang, it's not working, right? I need to do something different. So long story short, Gordon, to break the cycle, you need to break the cycle. You need to be the change and do the right thing within yourself. You need to be able to do that and do it because it's the right thing to do, not because you're hoping she's going to change or your kid's going to change. You need to do the right thing and change just because it's the right thing to do. And as you do that, you're going to see cycles break. They have to. They absolutely have to, with your kids, with your wife, with your friends, at work, wherever you go, you're going to see those cycles break.
I'll give you my take on this. Here's the magic word, right? You can use all of this stuff for sales, business, everything. The one thing I've changed besides reframing my mind is having different expectations from people. Hands down. If I expect people to have the same analogies, insights that I've had, and he doesn't have it, and I get upset, I lost the game. If my wife had the same turmoil, same stuff, and she still acted the same, guess what? My expectations of her changes because I don't have any of her. It's wrong of me to put that on anybody. Having those expectations, like Gary Vee said, the reason why he's so happy is he don't have expectations of anybody. Because nobody has the same path as you. So how can you expect somebody else to have the same knowledge as you, or insights, or experiences, or wisdom, or anything else like that? If I don't have expectations, it's like my kids. If I look at people as expectations, like my kid, they don't have the same knowledge. How can I expect them to act like me, do things like me, change the TV channel with the remote? when they don't know how to even say it,
Mm.
remote, right? So if I change my course of action and change my beliefs, rephrase everything, and I change my behaviors, guess what happens, Doc? I don't have high expectations of anybody else because they're not me. It's not my job to change my wife or my kids. It's my job to control me, my behaviors, my beliefs, and my wisdom and how I handle the situation. I do
Yep.
that for business. I do
Yep.
that for my talks. I do that in my sales. Look, if I wrote 7 books, guys, and somebody can't get one, I don't expect them to have the same knowledge as me to put it down on paper, right? Now, do I go from a 0 to 180 miles in a heartbeat? That's just my character. But having those expectations of anybody else, besides, unless we're doing a business collaboration or something, there's certain things I need to have addressed. How does childhood trauma impair those emotional irregulations?
You know, I would say your emotions are probably dysregulated because of the neglect and trauma you had as a child. Right? Most people do not know how to regulate their emotions. Most of us as men have never been taught. We've been taught not to have emotions. You're supposed to be stoic. You know, you're not supposed to feel anything. You just push forward. You know, you bury it and you keep moving forward.
Doc's about to go off right now.
But that's what happens, right? You know, that's how it ends up happening, right? Like we've never learned how to. And again, what we look at as emotional dysregulation, a lot of times, honestly, it's just people, they don't know how to control their emotions, but ultimately there's something's going on. Like our emotions are telling us something and no one is listening. No one, as PJ brought up, how they're not being true concern. No one is showing true concern. No one's stopping to say, hey, brother, you okay? Like, you good? Like with our kids, you look at a kid that may have had a behavior issue and you stop and ask, hey, what's going on?
What's going on, right?
You know, what happened? And you start listening to them and it makes sense. And tying into what you just said, Gordon, as far as like having these expectations for other people to have the same perspective and vision and eyesight as we do, which is ludicrous for us to think that other people should think just like us. Like, we are not God. We are not God. The only person who can have a perspective and say my perspective is right and yours is wrong is God, because he's perfect and makes no mistakes, never has, never will. Everybody else, it's just a perspective based off your experiences, your past, your hurt, your pain. That's what it's based off of. So it's going to look different. And so we need to do, instead of degrading our children, degrading other people, right? What we need to be doing is building them up. What we need to be doing is listening. What we need to be doing is, for one, knowing about emotions ourselves, knowing how to regulate ourselves, and teaching our kids, and teaching other people who might be in our lives as well. Like, hey, and just listening, you know, just taking time to listen and just, hey, let me hear you out. What's going on? That could go a long, long way just to stop and listen. And so really, that when it comes to those emotions, we got to make sure that we learn how to emotionally regulate, how to recognize our emotions, regulate our emotions 2, and respond to our emotions 3. We got to learn how to do those things, right? Because once we learn how to do that, we can teach our kids. We can say, hey, it's okay to be disappointed. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay. And not, oh, well, it's not a big deal. It's just a little test, or it's not a big deal. It's just a little game, or, oh, it's just a video game. I don't know why you're tripping over it. We need to stop invalidating and dismissing our children and our loved ones like that, because you wouldn't want someone doing that to you.
Exactly.
You wouldn't want someone doing that to you. And I just want to touch on 2 things real quick, Gordon.
Yeah.
You know, as a PJ, I know you were saying about the moral code of this world. And unfortunately, it's the world, right? They're looking to turn people against one another. One of the reasons why we even made Boundaries and Brotherhood, and this is just for everybody, was because they've created these engines, these grifters who've come and are feeding off of men who are hurt, who are feeding off of men who aren't appreciated. They're feeding off of them, and they're selling them this garbage. They're selling them trash. Oh, you got to be an alpha male, and you got to feel nothing. You got to sleep with all these women and make all this money, and then you'll be a real man and get a 6-pack abs, and then you'll be a real man once you do that, you know. And all these women are hoes, and yes, I'm like, no, but what's going on? These men are just flocking to this garbage, and they're shelling out hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars in droves to people who are using them, abusing them, and throwing them away. right? That's
Yeah.
why we created Boundaries and Brotherhood, because we're here to give you the real, right?
Yeah.
We're here to help you. We're here to pour into you. We're here to build you guys up with the truth, hold you accountable for where you're falling short, so that now you can be the man you want to be, but also making sure you're still validated and understood in the process. Because again, even in this, a lot of us as men, you're listening to this now, and maybe you made mistakes as a parent. Maybe your kids are already older, and it's like, dang, Keith, well, what do I do? Gordon, what do I do? It's not too late. You still do the work on yourself. You have to own the things you've done, own your shortcomings, and then go and make it right with your kids.
That's the main one.
Well, listen, you can't force it, but you can live a repentant life and a changed life, and then let it show, right? Because words are cheap. Actions are everything.
Here's what I tell my wife all the time. I don't care what people say. I mean, I see through behaviors, actions, and what they show. Because you cannot say, you can tell me to them, you got to think, I've closed a billionaire. I just closed another business. You traveled certain things, worked with other people. It all comes down to what is their behavior, right?
Yeah.
It comes down to what is behavior, because you cannot shift that. You cannot change that. It doesn't shift overnight. You can lie to yourself, and you'll be exposed a lot of times. Like you said, just all these guys that was the alpha male, everything, they're all getting frauded, going back to prison, getting jailed, losing everything because of what they did, because karma comes and bites you in your butt at one point. And a lot of times, in fact, one of the influencers, my friend, them are renting his wife's house right now. And she's a mess, right? There was like, Gordon.
And you see that, right? You see that,
literally.
The guys are talking about being alpha men, but yet you're going out and buying prostitutes. But women are supposed to be flocking to you with whatever you're teaching. You have all this money. Women are supposed to be flocking to you, but you're buying prostitutes. That's strange. Oh, he talking about how, single moms are just for fun, but you have you're playing stepdad to a woman that's not even your wife. You're playing a stepdad to her kids, but you're teaching everybody all this garbage. You see this stuff come out, or you're the big, strong alpha male, and anyone who knows, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to say any names. But you want to gang up on someone, jump them, and now you in jail again. No, you in jail again, right? But you an alpha male. You're supposed to be all big and strong and in control, but you can't even control your emotions. You out here getting your panties in a bunch, and now you in jail again, right? You look at a lot of these things, and like people, like you said, the media, they sell all these lies to us, right? But that's what these people are here to do. The gender wars, you see the people with couples and stuff like that, and the feminists with the rah-rah women and all that, they're grifting you. They're here to use you. They're here to manipulate you so they can line their pockets, so they can go away, and they'll be rich, and you'll be in a mess. Your family will be in a mess. Your life will be in a mess, and no one's going to be there to pick up the pieces. But that's why it's good to come into community with people who actually care, people who want to pour into you, people who want to instruct you, people where you can add value as well, because you could bring an experience in as well that we could all learn from. And that's something that's critical, because like even in my sessions, I learn from my clients sometimes. Bringing up things and saying things, I'm like, dang, that's good. That's a phenomenal idea. I learned from so this is the environment that we have here. And I know we've gone way off the question, because we were just talking about emotion regulation and how it plays a role and everything.
This is what the show is about.
But I think it's just important. It's so important for us to understand that, like, this is what we're here for. And then you're not alone. You don't have to be alone. You don't have to suffer alone. There's help. There is help for you, right? And then So I'll leave it at that.
Let me add it. Like I said, if you're interested, guys, it's here. I'm going to show you this page right here, right? I'm going to see right here. Can you see the page right here? Guys, if you're interested, right? If any of this resonates with you, right? You want to find your voice. You want to hold on to your boundaries. You want to do things. You want to lead with calm strength. You want to dial in your purpose. Guys, if you're not watching on TikTok, I'm streaming this on Facebook and YouTube at our Brothers and Brother channel, where we get a free assessment to get on the waiting list for the workshops and the webinars that we have going on at the end of this month. Guys, you can strengthen your confidence without becoming either cold or hard, like Doc said, right? You can communicate clearly with your kids, your coworkers, the people that you care about, so that you don't feel like you have self-doubt. A lot of this comes down to having boundaries and a brotherhood. I want to learn as much from you guys as, like Doc said, because I'm so interested in your backstory. I just wanted to say this for you, because you see this is the assessment that's going to come to you when you click here. You're going to hit this. Oh, I'm over here. You're going to hit the assessment. It's going to go straight to your Google webpage, right? Whoops. But we want to get it. This is where you seen Carrie over there. That page will take you to your assessment to get on the waiting list to come work with us personally, right? Because we want to get you the help, not the false help, not the snake oil salesman and everything else that you got going on. We want you to get the help that you really deserve. And knowing that, here's the difference, right? The difference between what you're seeing out there is like you have a person from the streets that partnered up with a real life therapist to bring you the same outcome, to be sustainable, find purpose, have confidence, conquer self-doubt, and live a sovereign life, to have a good communication with your kids, family, and everybody else that you come into contact to. Doc, you have any closing remarks, anything that we should be saying?
What I would say, guys, is when it comes to our lives, when it comes to us trying to do better, when it comes to us, like, take time. And it's critical for us to stop and take time and think about our actions and our behaviors and look at what we need to change, and not what our kids need to change, not what our wife needs to change. We need to stop and look at, what do I need to change? How do I need to be better? How can I communicate better? How can I regulate my emotions better? What do I need to do? And if you don't know what you need to do, but you know you need help, then reach out, right? Reach out to us. If you need therapy, you can reach out to me, but don't just stay in the same spot. Don't believe the lies of the enemy. That the Bible says that the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and that he comes to divide and conquer. That's what he comes to do. And there's lies that we've perpetuated as men, such as, I should handle it on my own. If I can't handle my own, I'm not a real man. That these are lies kept to keep us separated. All this social conditioning that's taken place, it's just used to keep us as men separated. And the fact of the matter is, the reason why it's designed to keep us separated, because what would happen if we as men collectively stood up? If we stood up and said what was right, we stood up and we were emotionally regular, we stood up and had boundaries and morals and values and did the right thing, then no evil can stand a chance across the board. If we are walking in our true strength and true power, there would be no corruption in government, because real men would stand up and stop that. There would be no corruption in business, because real men would step up and stop that. There would be no corruption in families, because real men would step up and stop that and hold other men accountable. So that's why all these lies have been created. And it's done nothing but pure damage and devastation from the beginning of history, right? And so it's so critical for us as men to stop. And how can I be a sovereign man in my own life? How can I do right? How can I show up? How can I make things better? How can I own my own behaviors and own what can I do? How can I keep showing up to be the best man I can be? And it starts with just pausing and saying, what can I do to be better? Just what can I do to be better? And I'm not talking about, will we make more money or get six-pack abs or anything like that. I'm not talking about the material stuff. I'm talking about internally. How do you need to change how you think? How do you need to change how you believe? How do you need to change your behaviors? What do you need to apologize for? What do you need to own? Ask yourself these questions. And as you ask yourself these questions and start making the changes necessary, then guess what? Your life is going to change drastically. And I would say, keep coming back. If this is your first time here, I would strongly recommend go back and watch a lot of our old live streams and old videos, right?
Look at our playlist. The playlist has it all. The podcast is right there. We got blog posts. We got everything. We're on the school community. We're on every single major platform there is.
And that's another thing too. Find, Gordon, which community do we want? I mean, I guess join every community, right?
We have one in the Reddit. Right. We do have one in school, right? We are on a podcast on YouTube. Yeah, we do have content in the back, and we'll be also having courses and a membership soon.
So I would say, guys, join in, get in. Whatever platform you frequent, hop on, right? Ask questions. You don't have to wait for the workshops and the seminars and things like that. You don't have to wait for that to start engaging and start changing your life right now. Like, you could start doing it right now. And again, that's why it's a brotherhood. Right? We come together and we help each other. And none of our platforms, and we also say this to everybody as well, none of our platforms are a place to tear other men down. None of our platforms are a place to ridicule people or anything along those lines. It's supposed to be a safe place where we can share and talk, and any issues we may have, we can offer suggestions and helpful suggestions, not toxic ones, right? Because I've seen some other communities, like Gordon, I've seen a guy will be like, hey, I'm struggling in my marriage. And they'll say, oh, she's cheating. You need to leave her. But it's like asking for help, and you're actually trying to destroy his relationship, right?
Yeah.
So if you can join our community so we can get the help you need, we can pour into you, and you can pour into others as well, right? We can get started right now.
All right, guys, this is Gordon Watt from Boundaries and Brotherhood. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Guys, we're here to help you and uplift you. Doc, end it.
You guys take care. Have a great and blessed day, guys, and come back. And yeah, just remember, you're not alone. You're not
Never
alone.
alone. Never alone. All right. Aloha. See you guys.